Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of this RDA-TIGRUS program on developing a US National PID strategy. My name is Todd Carpenter. Joining me is John Chodacki. We are the co-chairs of the ORFG PID Strategies Working Group. And this is part 3, focusing on desirable characteristics of PID systems. As we were developing this project, we wanted to focus the core elements of this on the characteristics of persistent identifier systems, rather than just producing a list of PID systems that should be adopted by the community. The reason for this is the working group decided that the research ecosystem is massive, it's complex, it's diverse, and we want to ensure that we are not simply including or excluding various committees and various communities in this ecosystem. And we felt that focusing on a short list of persistent identifiers that everyone should use didn't make a lot of sense in this vast US context. There are a variety of research approaches, established communities of practice that necessitate a much more nuanced approach to persistent identifiers in the US context. This is distinguishable from other national contexts, which might be more tightly organized, might be more tightly regulated or controlled through central funding bodies or research organizations. So the working group therefore decided to diverge from the RDA National PID Strategies guidance and instead focus on these key characteristics of PID systems in our own US recommendations. And inherent to building these principles, we relied heavily on existing knowledge and existing work that comes from a variety of community guidance documents. Among these, we relied heavily on the FAIR principles about findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable scholarly content. We relied also on the principles of open scholarly infrastructure, the Open Science Toolkit, Helios's Scholarly Communications Infrastructure Guide, the guidance provided by the Office of Science and Technology Policy in implementing National Security Presidential Memorandum 33, which focuses on persistent identifier use in scholarly research, as well as the European Open Science Cloud and its PID policies, as well as an ISO Principles of Identification document that's available as ISO 22943 that was developed by this technical subcommittee on identification and description. So I'm going to pass it over to John, and he can give you more information about what the desirable characteristics actually are. John?
Thank you, Todd. As Todd mentioned, our group spent considerable time determining what we really mean when we say what we want out of persistent identifiers. These characteristics were then cataloged and reported in the report that's available up on Zenodo, but also on the Upstream Force 11 blog that's linked here. To highlight some of those attributes and some of those things, we have a couple slides here to walk through, but we definitely look for the community to give us feedback and to read more about them within the report and on the Upstream blog. So to take a step back and really say why we did this work, as Todd mentioned, it was to elevate the conversation from PID brand names and specific PID systems and really talk about what is it within the US and beyond we are trying to aim for when we have consistent and best practice PID systems. Some of these characteristics are things that are well known and well understood. Obviously, things like persistence are something that people understand because it's in the name of persistent identifiers. But some of these other characteristics are things that not everybody is on the same page about. We want to make sure that we have a dialogue and a good understanding of what we really want and what we really need from exemplar PID systems, so that as we move forward with a PID policy and PID strategies within the US and beyond, we are all on the same page. Obviously, one of the most important things with persistent identifiers is the idea of stability and persistence, and really thinking about how we can ensure consistent and long-term access to the digital objects, but also to the metadata and information about those digital objects, their location, their ownership, and all that information is important for us as a community to make sure there are consistent custodians long-term. Also, in addition to that, we want to make sure there's global uniqueness, not just local uniqueness. So identifiers that identify an object and eliminate any of the issues of understanding what is duplication and disambiguation, precise referencing of each object on a global level, not just on a local level. And one of the things that many people are not aware of is that persistent identifiers also really need to focus on resolvability. So not just identifying, but also being able to easily resolve to the objects that they reference. So either through a URL or another system, being able to enable the access to that object and that metadata, and making sure that that is something that's well known and open to the community. And not just that resolvability being open, but also the metadata itself. So we know that persistent identifiers are important because they offer a way to retrieve metadata and information about digital objects. We also want to make sure that that metadata schema, the information about it and about the object, but also the way that that information is structured is something that is transparent and reusable, and people understand how it's created and it's maintained. As part of that, how that would happen is through community governance. Persistent identifiers require some level of community governance. So there is an understanding of who are the custodians, who are the stewards, who are the caretakers of not just the persistent identifier communities themselves, but also the research objects that they're geared towards. Community input and consensus is important because it offers a way for long-term custodianship and that persistence to be guaranteed. And a part of that includes documentation, making sure that the policies and the practices and the technical specifications within a specific PID infrastructure is available openly and is constantly being tended to. And that kind of tending to things and monitoring and reporting is also important because we want to make sure that there are, if there are any issues, there is an opportunity for the community itself to resolve those and elevate those and make sure that there is a guarantee of continued reliability. One of the things that we really wanted to also highlight as a desirable characteristic of persistent identifiers is this idea that there should be an ease of assignment, and there should be a very well understood understanding of how the metadata and the information is being curated. This should be something that does not have a lot of barriers, that is very straightforward and is very user-friendly, because as we look for adoption and for there to be additional groups involved in different PIDs infrastructure, we want to make sure that those barriers are as low as possible. And so that it will not only help with that constant curation and understanding of how the metadata and the community itself is governed, but also really so that outside groups and others in this space can also help with the final on the list here, which is interoperability. Seamless exchange of information between systems is essential within science and research and our information infrastructure. But one of the things that PIDs really can do is offer and facilitate that. And so the only way that that is possible really is when you lower those barriers and you allow for the documentation and the governance to be something that is open and well understood by communities. And so these desirable characteristics are things that we want to make sure are the whole of the definition of what a quality PID infrastructure system is. We want the entirety of that list to be something that people are debating and understanding, so that as we move forward with our national PID strategy, we have a good understanding of what are the groups or the approaches that we want to endorse and rally around. And so as we reflect on this and we come to the close of this session within our series, we just want you to reflect on what you may have heard and learned. What are some of the tools that you and your organization are currently using? And how do they fit against these best practices and these desirable characteristics? Can you apply some of these to your systems, to your internal systems? And how would you think that they stack up against these desirable characteristics? And potentially, are there ways for you to make those systems internally more open?
For more information about this entire project, We've been as open as we can be with as we've developed this. There is, as John mentioned, the Zenodo link where you can get the actual report. There is a blog post on the Force 11 website focused on desirable characteristics of persistent identifiers. There is also a blog post on the Scholarly Kitchen website, as well as an ongoing community discussion related to the National PID strategy in this report. We're trying, as John said, to bring these recommendations out to the community and foster greater conversation. And the PID forum is one area where we can continue this ongoing conversation.
So we want to thank again our conveners, the ORFG, Helios, and Spark, who really brought us together and helped us with drafting this report and making sure it was available to the public, as well as to TIGRUS Facilitation Program, RDA-US, just hosted the Pervasive Technology Institute at Indiana University. We really want to thank TIGRUS Group and RDA-US on their facilitation of these videos and on helping us with bringing this information to you.